Let me jump to, we got a lot of stories we got to go through, but maybe the most important one right now in this context is this story from Business Insider. Democrats spend over $1 million to boost Dan Cox, the Trump loyalist and 2020 election denier, who just won the GOP primary for Maryland governor. Literal conspiracy. It's a literal conspiracy. The Democrats have a scheme to put money into Trump supporting candidates who they then come out and say are an existential threat. They are scheming to manipulate the American people, freaking them out, but funding. It's a false flag. This is literally the Democrats engaging in a false flag. This is going, look, let's say the Democrats are right. Trump supporters are an existential threat to this country. Trump's candidates and MAGA candidates, they're funding them and propping them up. Some are winning the primaries. The idea is we'll beat them in the primary. And if you don't, and even if you do, they gain followers from you helping them regardless. They're not going to go away. So if the Democrats are right, it's a threat, they are literally funding it. And if the reality is they're not a threat, Democrats are engaging in a false flag operation on the American people via politics to seize power. Okay, fine. That's not a coup attempt. That's something dastardly at the very least.
Do you know who's warning them against this? Mitt Romney. He's telling them this is a stupid strategy. You shouldn't do this. I believe Hogan even came out and said he was saying we're having Democratic interference in our election. I mean, Hogan has called Cox a QAnon whack job, I believe is the quote. Yeah. He is not a fan at all, but he is also not looking, for a guy who's built his reputation on being able to work with Democrats in his state. He doesn't want this organization coming in and messing with Maryland.
I mean, they were actively putting this out. Kelly Schultz had sent out multiple email campaigns. I'd got him say, listen, this is what's happening. And for me, I've talked about it several times today. I am still mind blown. And people, they were talking about it one of my friends was like, he's going to put God and country back into, the schools. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's in Maryland. Democrats outnumber you 2-1. And the independents in Maryland aren't going to lean that far right, in my opinion. Maybe I'll be absolutely crazy, but the guy they're putting him up against, I don't know if you know anything about Wes Moore, but Wes Moore won the top 40 under 40, very important people shaping the future of Maryland when I won it. He wrote a book called The Other Wes Moore. I'm almost positive he's a combat veteran, but I know he's definitely a veteran. He was from Baltimore, he's a best-selling author,
His book is interesting.
He's a handsome fella, tall and handsome.
Don't bring that up.
Right? He's gonna.
I make one gaffe and then I'm Joe Biden.
He's gonna. In Baltimore and in Maryland, he's gonna chew Dan Cox up.
Check out the New York Times data. 62% reporting from the Democrat side, and they're already up about 140,000 votes. So, look, the question about whether or not Democrat Maryland goes Republican, I'm not super worried about that. Dan Cox won by 16 points. Good for him. I don't see Kelly Schultz winning either. I mean, the turnout on the Republican side wasn't that high. The bigger issue is Democrats and the schemes, the manipulation on the American people. Look, did you really think Maryland, regardless of this, would become a Republican state?
I didn't think it would become a Republican state. I know Kelly, and maybe there's some bias there, but I genuinely think that she had an opportunity coming behind Hogan where the state had improved as much as it had. And I believe she was the Commerce Secretary or Labor Secretary, one of the two. And I thought she could get independence and again, with the sentiment being as much against Biden as it is, that she stands a very strong probability at this year. I literally said, if you're going to win, this was the year for you to win, right? I think she had a shot and still was going to be a fight. Dan Cox, I'll owe you 20 push-ups.
I mean, I get that too, but she couldn't even muster. It's like if you can't get enough support from your own party, I don't see how she could win. Look, if you can't convince Republicans to vote for you, you think you'll convince independents, I suppose? I just don't know.
And I think Maryland's a weird state for Republicans because basically all of one side of it, the three western counties want to leave. They don't want to be involved anymore.
They want to go join West Virginia.
They sent letters to West Virginia being like, please, we'd like to go. And West Virginia was like, we'll have you. Just you have to ask Baltimore, and Baltimore is like, shh, can't hear you. Stop asking that.
I don't think they would do that because then what would happen if there was all of a sudden just a massive migration of parts of states? Like they literally just start swapping and changing.
They should.
It's not a bad idea.
Save the country, in my opinion.
The county,
state of Jefferson.
The county under the Eastern Panhandle in West Virginia, it's part of Virginia, it has Winchester, Virginia in it. In its constitution, if I'm remembering correctly, a West Virginia state senator told me this. They have a bylaw in there that when West Virginia seceded, they left it so if they decide later they're frustrated with Virginia, they could leave. So that still stands. They could file out and be like, we don't want to be here anymore. That's not true for the 3 counties in Maryland, but it is interesting that there are these places saying we don't look like where our capitals are. We are not represented by our values.
We're in Western Maryland, and it is MAGA country. Mm-hmm. You go to the grocery store outside of Frederick and Brunswick, and it's like Trump signs everywhere.
And it gets more intense as you keep driving through the Panhandle.
But you go into Frederick, and then the Trump flags turn into rainbow flags.
Mm-hmm. And what's crazy about that is, and we were actually talking about this earlier, is like a Republican, even when, because Frederick flipped the year that I ran, it flipped blue, right? And there was a big conversation about whether or not it was going to stay that way based on the migration from Montgomery County up. But what's crazy about it is, why does that happen in just the city? Like, everything else is absolutely red, but this little small city that we have, it instantly morphs to where it's Democrat. And then it's all people coming in. And what's crazy about it is people leave MoCo because they don't like MoCo, and then they turn Frederick into MoCo.
Yep.
People leave California and go to Austin because they didn't like California, but you turn Austin into California, and it's like,
because they don't understand how they caused the problem. The snowflake doesn't blame itself for the avalanche. Simply put, Joe Rogan moves from California to Texas, like Texas will be better, and then everyone says, yeah, but I like Joe's opinions, and then it's like, but Joe has staff. And Joe has industry around him. And the industry is woke and left. So if Joe Rogan comes to Austin, sets up a comedy club, which he's doing, he's going to attract woke leftists from California who aren't going to have those opinions. He's going to attract their sound producers and their stage managers and their taxi drivers and their restaurateurs. And then Texas turns Democrat.
Kind of like colonization.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like they're colonizing.
But to be fair, there is a cultural influx into Texas, which is actually turning it fairly purplish, like purple leaning red. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing like in Austin, it's like kind of blue, but people there are fairly anti-woke, which is surprising. Not completely, but I'm hearing that at least from a lot of people. And what I'm hearing from some of our friends who moved to Austin, it's because they're moving there. So maybe it is a good thing. Me, I like West Virginia because it's already like the second most Trump supporting state in the country with like 86% Trump support. Not
the
that I think
entire state, every county went red.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Trump is a god emperor or anything like that, but I would rather be surrounded by people who will leave me alone than people who won't. Simply put.
I like West Virginia because it's culturally purple. Like, it was such a blue state for such a long time, and it's changed to being red now. I mean, I think it is, I said this before, but it's a marker of the fact that the parties are changing, but the people's values aren't necessarily. They're not being interpreted or projected by the parties the way they were back in the day. And I don't know. I think that you'll see that there are states that turn blue because of migration, but you'll see states that turn purple because they're not represented equally by the two-party system anymore.
That's a good point. You were saying earlier, Danny, that you thought that like oh, I think I lost my thought there. Oh, that rhino. You don't like the term rhino, dino. Republican idiom only. And what you're saying, Hannah Claire, is like that the people aren't being represented by the party. There's too many disparate ideas to have one party represent them. There should be lots of different parties at this point, I think. Because people are rhinos. They say they're Republican because it's one or the other. You got to pick one, but your identity doesn't fall in line with that.
Well, there used to be the term like blue blood Democrat, right? Blue dog, yeah. Which was blue dog Democrat or whatever it is. But like, it's like back then, like you were like, kind of how I look at myself. Like, I don't want you spending my money. You know what I'm saying? I don't want you in my life, but I don't care what you do in your life. Like, knock yourself out. It doesn't bother me at all. Like, if you want to hug trees, hug trees. I'm cool with that. But that's gone now. And what I can't understand is how the parties continuously switch back and forth as to who's who. You guys were talking about it the other day where like now the Republican Party is becoming like the blue collar working
diverse
person, right? Where that was the Democrats for a long time. Like, it was blue collar, unions, the whole 9 yards. So I admit at one point in time Democrats had the KKK. You know, when were we, how does that switch happen?
I don't think it ever switched.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so. There's a whole bunch of articles, and many have written their thesis on how the party switch never happened. But I think if you look at the Democrats today and you look at the Democrats in the 50s and go back, you're like, their policies had this similar results across the board. It was just, I mean, it is what it is.
Well, that's like places like Baltimore. Like, how do you blame Republicans and Democrats have been in charge there for what?
And Chicago, and how do you blame the right for police brutality? Or, you know, they march in New York City, but they keep voting for these people to keep doing it, then protest the people they're voting for. They talk about racist cops. Yo, you live in a Democrat stronghold in New York where Democrats are appointing the racists. Yeah. That's why I'm like, it's not changed. It's the same thing. They just need the PR push to claim it did. I look at the policies Democrats are enacting. Look at this. California, they tried to repeal their civil rights provision from their state constitution. That's the Democrats for you. You know, it's funny. Right now, I was trolling on Twitter, and I put something like, someone commented about abortion and denial of personhood rights. And I said, yeah, well, you know who else wanted to deny personhood rights? And I was going to put the Confederacy, and then I was like, that was also the Democrats.
Oh, wait a second.
And I was like, oh, wait. The Democrats back then denied personhood. They deny it today. You know, look, you want to issue a moral statement on abortion? Fine. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the left is inherently of opposing personhood rights for the unborn. It was the Democratic Party that opposed personhood rights for slaves. The Republicans wanted civil rights and constitutional rights for everybody.
So you think the Democrats just, for literally the entire time of the United States, just have a better PR team?
Well, I don't know about a better PR team. I think they had a worse PR team in the Civil War. Everyone, like, you had to think, what, almost 3 times as many Union soldiers fighting against them.
Yeah.
So I think maybe later on they started to figure out, maybe in the past several decades, they learned control of institutions was power and they needed to seize it. You know, I take a look at a lot of the, you know, we talked a bit about this the other day. You take a look at AOC pretending to be handcuffed, and it's just like manipulation for power.
Oh, she actually said something about that. Said that if it's
it was just safer.
Yeah, you're supposed to keep them down and back because otherwise, if your arms are flailing, they might say that you're resisting arrest.
Oh, come on.
I really wanted the headline on our site to be AOC poses in handcuffs in front of Capitol, because it was just like such a moment. She clearly decided that was the way it was supposed to be.
But is anything less impressive than being a Congress person getting arrested where there's absolutely going to be no real repercussion against you? Like,
catch and release.
Yeah.
Did she face any backlash for that from people being like, there are people who are arrested who don't have the ability to get out of jail the way you would, you know?
I wouldn't be surprised if the vote comes for its own, being like, you're privileged, that's why you got out of jail, or whatever. And then she'd be like, but I'm fighting for you. And it's like, look, it is undeniable that you have many Democrats today who will publicly scream racism is bad, whereas you had Democrats in the past who would scream that segregation was good. Like, the problem is Democrats saying racism is bad is just a mask for them saying segregation is good. Democrats are outright the party of segregation today, and they've always been. That's why I'm like, I don't know where that party is, which supposedly happened. You can say it was the 50s or whatever. But when you go to Seattle or Portland, you see the libraries and they have POC and non-POC rooms. You're like, yeah, it ain't the Republicans who are calling for that. It's the Democrats once again.
Wasn't there a college where a bunch of, or a group of students of color had been like, we want our own dorm. We should be like allowed to have our own space. And you were thinking like, but I thought this is segregation. I thought we had fought against this.
They do that. They I was reading someone's article about how they have like Asian dorms and black dorms. I think it's like the UC system in California, University of California system. And the answer I think they gave, I could be wrong, was like, people want this. And I'm like, you know, I guess it doesn't mean you make it. You know what I mean? If you know, if people choose to live next to each other, I guess there's not really much you can say. If people are looking for a dorm and you're like, that's the dorm for your race, that's the dorm for their race, it's like, that's a bad idea. You should not do that.
I just thought it was weird because it's these institutions that like charge you a bunch of money to live like this far away, like one arm's length away from the other person. Their rooms are so small you can touch your roommate's bed. And then they're like, no, but if people want to live by race, it's fine. Like, they don't actually care about how people live.
How crazy
caring about
is
the
that,
money.
man? I remember hanging out at the Columbia dorms in Chicago, and it's a 2-bedroom with, I think, 8, or maybe it was 4 or 8 people. I'm not sure. I think it was 4 people. Each room had 2 bunk beds in it, or had a bunk bed in it for 2 beds. And then they were like, it's $1,000 a month to live here. And then I was like, you live with 3 other people and you spend $1,000 a month. Why don't y'all just, like, I don't know, buy a house? You got $4,000 per month. You can go buy a house not that far away from here. And they're like, I don't know.
Well, colleges make it a requirement to live on campus. So that first year they're charging you, and you have to buy whatever the biggest like food or meal package or whatever else. So they're guaranteeing money. I mean, they are not in it for your personal growth. They're in it for their bottom line.
College is a scam.
Yep.
Yeah. Do they actually make people live on campus? There were people that would commute on when I was going.
I mean, different schools do it different ways, but a lot of schools, the first year, first two, you're required to live on campus.
It's like a status school where it's like cool for you to be part of it. So they want to make you have to agree to it. Like it's community college, no one cares that you're going. You can commute all you want.
Yeah. Well, they like market it to like families as like, oh, so your student can get adjusted and be acclimated and like get used to living away from home. Like it's a safety net. Like they're gonna kind of babysit your kid for you.
That is cultish beyond measure. I didn't know they were forcing kids to go stay there with them while they indoctrinate them. I thought that people could still commute. That's
well,
crazy.
it's just the first 2 years when you're the most vulnerable to indoctrination.
Most susceptible.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Come hang out live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Super Chat will even answer some of your questions. If you want to check out the After Hours Censored Show, go to timcast.com and become a member. We put those up Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. They're very funny, not very family friendly. We'll love to see you there. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.